All right, we're live here at Buffalo Trace Distillery for another episode of Whiskey Wednesday, and I'll tell you, this is going to be a really fun episode. Just so you know, we're in Warehouse C. We've got guest Lee, one of our great tour guides, and we're going to catch up with Bo Beckman a little later. But I'm going to let you know where we are. So I'm going to spin around here, and if, as you can tell, we've got a rainy Kentucky day. So if you've ever been to the distillery, that's the gift shop. Warehouse C is right next to it. But we're inside today because of the rain. And Lee, let's kick this thing off.
All right, well, welcome everybody to Buffalo Trace and to our historic Warehouse C. Today, as you probably know, we're going to be focusing on a new E.H. Taylor release featuring Warehouse C. Warehouse C is the oldest warehouse, really the oldest building on the property that's still being used in its original intended purpose. This building was built in 1885. We've been storing barrels in here ever since it was built. Now, we don't have any of the same ones from the original days here, but we've been using it that way because it produces such great bourbon. This warehouse has been producing great bourbon for 130 whatever years. And so just a little bit about our warehouses. We'll talk more about the release. Just to give you a little context about this old warehouse. One of the things that makes this warehouse great is one of the first ones that E.H. Taylor built that is multi-story. So we have air circulation that goes up all 6 levels in this warehouse. The air circulation is what helps mature the bourbon and helps give it that wonderful flavor. It's not, you get a lot of air circulation, the humidity is just perfect, the airflow, all of that just all comes together to make truly terrific bourbon. And some of our best whiskeys are produced right here in this warehouse and have been since 1885. Really what's happened in the warehouse is when it gets hot, the bourbon expands into the wood, into the char. When it gets cold, it contracts. With all the different levels in here, the different zones, we're getting lots of that circulation, lots of that cycling, giving it the greatest flavor. Now we have 24,000 barrels sitting in here in this warehouse. Each barrel holds 53 gallons. That's a standard across the industry. Each barrel weighs nearly 550 pounds when it's full. So, you can kind of do the math yourself. 24,000 barrels, 550 pounds each, building built in 1885, and we're standing here on the lowest floor. Okay. So if something happens to the picture, the storm, who knows? But no, we know it's a perfectly safe warehouse. In fact, this has been standing since 1885, even after being struck by a tornado back in 2006. Now there's some damage. About half the roof was ripped off, part of the brick wall collapsed on one side, but we didn't lose a single barrel, not even one. In fact, those barrels that were exposed to the elements during the 6 months or so it took to build all that back were later bottled and sold as E.H. Taylor Jr. Warehouse C Tornado Surviving Edition. And it wasn't just good marketing. It was a really tremendous bourbon. But now it was a very limited release. If you didn't get any when it came out back in 2011, you're pretty much out of luck because we have no plans to ever make any more.
Hope not.
Of that one.
I hope not.
But we got lots of other great stuff.
So, Lee, on the, I know we're talking about Warehouse C release and Warehouse C today, but on the Tornado Survivor,
yeah,
those barrels were exposed to the sun and the elements
Correct.
Longer because the roof was gone. Is
right,
that
exactly,
okay.
Exactly, yeah. Very, very unique aging experience. In fact, we used that as incorporated part of that idea into our experimental Warehouse X that we started a few years ago.
Oh, that's right. And we've done past episodes with Harlan on Whiskey Wednesday about Warehouse X. Always a great episode. Hey, I'm just going to pause and I'm going to turn around and show everybody where we are one more time. I don't know if sound, we had a little issue there, but I just want everybody to know if you come to the distillery, this is the gift shop. Again, rainy day, so we're staying inside, and Warehouse C is directly across from it, just so you know. So it's a can't miss warehouse, a lot of photos taken of it. So that's where we are today. All right, Lee, and I'm going to apologize to everybody if we take a walk and we're in the middle of this warehouse. Just want to make sure connection's okay, but if it's not and we start cutting out, we'll pick up when it picks up.
Yeah, E.H. Taylor did a lot of innovations in his day, but Wi-Fi wasn't one of them.
Yeah,
so
true. Okay, do you want to take a walk, see some barrels?
Sure, let's walk on through.
Okay.
As I mentioned, we've got 24,000 barrels being aged in this warehouse on 6 levels. Each rick is 3 barrels high, and there's a rick on each of those floors. Again, that was one of the innovations that E.H. Taylor made. The ricking structure that you see in pretty much every warehouse now was actually an invention in the mid-1800s. And one of the many things that Taylor adopted early on was that ricking structure. And again, that's one of the things that makes this particular warehouse so unique. In fact, the warehouses that we're building right now, our brand new warehouses, are built exactly the same way.
I can tell you've done that a few times. You knew your steps. So I'm just gonna kind of peek in here. So we've got, oh, that's always a nice barrel to show off.
We've got some of our experimental barrels in here.
It's great.
We've got some brand new
you can
that were just filled just a few days ago, and we've got some that have been in here for years.
Very
17
cool.
years, something like that.
All right. So we've got folks from all over. We got people from Texas, North Carolina. So we get quite a few folks around checking out Whiskey Wednesday. So big shout out to everybody.
Well, one thing that I don't know if you can get this or not that we didn't talk about when we were in here before. One of the things that Taylor put in a way to make sure that the building is going to stay standing, there's a plumb bob in every warehouse, a weight on a string that goes all the way to the crown rafter of the warehouse. And there's a target at the bottom, and the warehouse workers will monitor that because the ricks are independent from the brick walls of the warehouse. So as they're moving the barrels in and out, they can shift a little bit without damaging the building. But if they get too far off, they can check that plumb bob. If it's off plumb, if it's not straight up and down, they know they have to come in and readjust the load, or the potential for bringing the whole warehouse down could happen.
Wow. So yeah, weight distribution in these things, in these warehouses, are extremely important.
And that's why our new warehouses are built in exactly the same way. Nobody's found a better way to support all of these thousands of tons of whiskey than the inventor of these ricks.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great nugget of information there, Lee. So yeah, let's. So you covered how many barrels we have in here. So this is a place. Does our regular tour come through here?
We have some of the tours that come through. We have another warehouse that our standard trace tour goes in, but our barrel tour comes in here. Our Old Taylor tour, where we focus on the life and times of V.H. Taylor and talk about all of his many innovations and the structures and things that are still here associated with him, does come into this warehouse as well.
Okay, that's great. And I always like to make sure people know how to take a tour. So you can go online and register. Is it all pre-registered?
Everything right now, all of our tours and tastings are advanced reservations. BuffaloTraceDistillery.com, the Visit Us tab, all the instructions will be there. Now, we are limiting still, due to COVID, we have to limit the numbers on our tours to about 10 to 12 right now, and so they do fill up very quickly. So we open them up early in the month for the following month, and they do fill up pretty quickly. So you keep your eye on that website.
Okay. So we've got some questions coming in.
Sure.
If you don't mind, I'm going to ask you a few of those. So we're getting asked, let's see here, there's a bunch coming in. So Rossman Tarver Jr. asked, do all Taylor products come from Warehouse C? Is that something that most of them come from, or is this just one of the favorites for that brand?
Those brands are closely associated with Warehouse C.
Okay.
My role, I can't say absolutely, but certainly a majority of the barrels for those products are going to be coming from here.
Yeah, we know it's this warehouse has been a favorite for a long time, especially since he created it, right? What about, we've got a general question from Brenton Shaw about, on average, how many gallons are left in a barrel once it's done aging? And I'm assuming that depends on the age, right?
It does. The Angels share. That's Angels really like bourbon because their share is going to be about, on average, around 4% a year of the volume of the barrel. Now, it is going to vary depending on where you are. You're going to lose more on the upper floors of the warehouse because that's closer to heaven, because it's hotter. So it evaporates more rapidly there, a little bit more slowly down here on the lower floors. But just given that, the bourbon that we're talking about today is a 10-year-old bourbon.
Okay.
And so we're expecting to get maybe around half of a 53-gallon barrel at 10 years.
Okay, that makes sense. I know we're going to get into this a little bit more, and we have Bo. Bo's around the corner here, going to chat it up. But Paul on Facebook does ask, can you share the floor and position of the barrels that were blended for this release. Is that
Yeah.
something that Bo's going to chat about, or?
Well, I can go ahead and address
Okay.
that. Bo can talk into more why they chose those two. But the barrels for this were about half and half of them from level 2, right above where we are, and half of them from level 5, a little bit higher.
Okay.
And so just that much difference in elevation gives very different conditions, different flavors, and then we married those barrels together to create the unique flavor for this particular product.
Okay, great. That's great. Just check in. Let's see. All right, let's check in with Bo.
Okay.
Let's head on over, Lee.
We're going to be walking past a ricker. One of the common questions we get on our tours is how do we get these barrels into the ricks? It's basically just like a dolly with a platform on a chain drive. They'll roll the barrels in onto the platform, lift them up, roll them into the rick. When they're
Gotcha.
taking the barrels out, it's pretty much the same thing. They bring the platform up, roll them out, drop them down, and then roll them out of the warehouse.
Okay, so there must be a skill too, because I'm thinking about, now that we're in a warehouse, we're looking at all these barrels. I know the bung, the hole in the barrel, needs to face up.
Yes.
And so the person has to have that skill and that experience to roll these down the rick, right? And
Right.
So what does that take?
Well, they call it clocking.
Okay.
And so you've got all of these barrels in a rick, and it varies according to the warehouse how many barrels there are.
Mm-hmm.
But when they position the barrel at one end, at the high end, because they're slightly angled, they have to position that bung just so when it rolls into position at the far end, the bung winds up at 12 o'clock.
Got it.
Second barrel coming into position behind that first one has fewer revolutions to get into position. They have to position the bung differently, and so on all the way around or all the way down the rick. In fact, they have competitions for that at the Bourbon Festival down in Bardstown, the barrel rolling contest. And they didn't have one last year, but the past 2 years, Buffalo Trace barrel rolling teams won that competition.
Oh, that's great.
So we're pretty good at it.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
Right.
Let's check out this release. So I had mentioned before, Bo has a pretty unique insight on E.H. Taylor the man. So we'll chat it up with Bo here. Bo's just hanging out in Warehouse C,
Hello.
picking some barrels. Good. All right, Bo. So let's chat about this release and E.H. Taylor and all the things.
Awesome. Yeah, another special annual release. So we have the Warehouse C E.H. Taylor. It's a 10-year-old blend. As Lee said, the barrels were from the second floor of this warehouse and the fifth floor of this warehouse and batched together. What's interesting about this warehouse is, we talk about it being the oldest warehouse that has been continuously used on property. Well, there's, we call it Warehouse C, but there is actually a Warehouse B.
Okay.
Warehouse B was built right next to the river. And
And
warehouse.
is this Taylor's warehouse
This
too?
was one of Taylor's warehouse.
Okay.
It was the first warehouse he built at the distillery, and it was right next to the river. So, E.H. Taylor, we talked about before, was actually born in Kentucky, moved to New Orleans, saw where a lot of the money was coming in. He was in the finance industry at the time, and moved to Kentucky to open up distilleries. And before he moved to Kentucky, he went to Europe and learned all about distilling and all about the industry. So he came back from Scotland and took what he learned and then built this state-of-the-art distillery. So over in Scotland, a lot of the aging warehouses are right next to the ocean. And the ocean, there is a mist that comes off and it has salt in it. Well, that salt would go up into those warehouses in Scotland, kind of form a crust around the barrels. Well, the Warehouse B that was right next to the river was built 2 stories, not a lot of windows, and a flat roof. So really, it would get very humid, and there was no salt in the humidity coming off of the river, and that was very poor for aging.
Gotcha.
So that warehouse is basically left as is and untouched. And then in 1885, we built, or E.H. Taylor built this warehouse, Warehouse C, and he learned from building Warehouse B and applied it here. So a taller building, more windows, more conducive to barrel aging and actual bourbon and what the whole industry is about here.
Gotcha. Well, I'm going to take a look at these barrels real quick while you're chatting it up. I'm just going to take a walk down here and check this out. So when Lee was talking about how many barrels we had, can you put that mic on him real quick? we're having a little bit of sound issue. He was talking about how many barrels, and so when I'm coming through here and looking, there's just, you can sort of see how deep these things go. And like you said, we're on the first floor, and there's 4 floors of these, so it is incredibly full already. Okay. All right. Swapped a couple mics there. I think we're good to go. All right.
I'm back again.
We're back. Now we can hear you good, Bo.
All right. Now, did you capture anything I said last time?
Yeah, we
Some of
did.
it?
But let's sort of.
Yeah. Well, so the gist of it is this is not the first warehouse E.H. Taylor built. This is the second warehouse he built that we're aware of. The first warehouse we don't use today because he built it too close to the river.
Yeah.
He built it close to the river because when he got into the industry, he did a tour of Europe and learned all about distilling and wanted to build, the state-of-the-art bourbon distillery, and made a mistake on his first warehouse. So Warehouse C, 1885, he came back and built more windows, better to draw out the humidity, just a better aging environment. So what we've done is we've picked barrels from the second floor and barrels from the fifth floor and batched them together to do this release. So all the barrels were at least 10 years old. I've been working here for 10 years. I started June of 2011, and these barrels were all filled before I started. So it's crazy that I've been here forever, it feels like, and these were still made before I started. Can
I ask you a question real quick?
Please.
So Nicholas, the question's coming in really fast here, so I got to scroll. Nicholas Power says, what floor is deemed the best floor for aging in Warehouse C? Is there a favorite amongst you guys? Is there a favorite floor? Is there a better floor?
It depends on what brand.
Okay.
Or not what brand, the age of the barrel, so I guess technically what brand too. So say something like the second floor, it is a very dry climate on the second floor of this building, and the ricks are very tight together, so there's not as much airflow on the second floor of this building as even on the fifth floor of this building there's more airflow. So the second floor is a slower aging environment, and it's actually, from an efficiency standpoint, it's hard to get the barrels in and out of our second floor. So not only does it, luckily it ages well for older barrels, 10 to 15 years is kind of the range, but it is also just not conducive to doing a lot of barrels in there anyway. So the fifth floor is more open, so there's more breeze coming through, just higher temperature fluctuations, and that will be a bit of a harsher, might not be the right word, but more of an expedited, if you will, aging condition.
Just because of the heat.
Just because of the heat, there's a lot more interaction, just there's more going on. So when you blend and you batch those together, it makes for a nice even batch. This Warehouse C, there's all sorts of just delicious notes that come across in it. Cherry is a big one that stands out. But you can kind of see where you get those taste profiles based on where they come from.
Very cool. And I think that's the beauty of this distillery too, and these old warehouses. There's 200 plus years of distilling history and aging, so we know the sweet spots. We know what you can predict each floor to create certain flavor profiles and a great blend. And when we start to marry different barrels from different floors, we pretty much know what it's going to do, right?
Yeah, you can. It's easier to know what's going to happen when you marry and batch than it is when you do one barrel at a time.
Sure, that makes sense.
There's too many variables that you have to consider one barrel at a time, but when you're batching, you can get a better feel for it. So in reality, this Warehouse C batch will give you kind of a good idea of how Warehouse C ages. We also took the barrels from the center of the warehouse.
Okay.
There's people on both camps. So some people want the barrel right next to the window, getting in the sun. Some people want the barrels from the center of the warehouse because it's a little more subdued aging environment. So all of these were center cut barrels. So second floor, fifth floor, all 10 years old. The batch, so the Warehouse C bottles will start hitting the market in early June. It's going to be limited. It's our annual release.
So every year there's a different E.H. Taylor release.
18-year-old Marriage, Amaranth. We've done a few over the years.
Amaranth was really good. I like Amaranth is great. And this year's is Warehouse C. And 10 years old.
10
bottled
years
and
old,
bond.
bottled
Just
and
like
bond,
just like
all
the
from Warehouse
rest.
C.
Okay.
Yep.
Judd Scott does ask about this warehouse. Do we close the windows based on the weather?
Yes and no. So the windows are open and shut. Harlan has his own, the whole warehouse team has their, it's kind of one of those
preference.
We do it the way we've been doing it type deal.
Yeah.
There's probably not one person who can tell you exactly how or why we do it a certain way.
Certain
But,
floors probably
I'm looking at the
different
window that's open right behind you right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes you'll come in, they're shut, sometimes they're
I know.
open.
I know. Every time I'm in here, it's different.
It's the secret to the recipe.
That's right. Veronica Lowry has an interesting question. Does the proof change batch to batch? And maybe we touch on bottle to bottle a little bit there, Bo.
Yeah, so the way to think about it is when these barrels are aging, so the E.H. Taylor barrels, when they were filled, they were 125 proof, and it would have been 53 gallons filled. Well, that first year, we're going to lose about 10%, and then every year after that, about 4%. Well, as that volume is going down, the water molecule is smaller than the alcohol molecule, so the water molecule can go in and out of the barrel over the course of the life. Alcohol mainly gets stuck in there. So essentially, as the volume is going down in the barrel, the alcohol content is going up as water comes out.
And that's pretty unique to our area, right? I mean,
yes.
Because of it gets so hot.
Yeah, it would happen everywhere. It's just more drastic here and quicker here, just because, one day it's Friday and sunny, and the next Sunday it's it's blizzard.
87 degrees yesterday. It's going to be 63 tomorrow or something like that. So.
It's all over.
Yeah.
So that definitely helps.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So, Bo, I got to ask you. We know we've hinted to this a few times in past episodes. So E.H. Taylor is family, right?
Yes.
So maybe can you just talk about that just a little bit? I know you guys are related, so you have a really unique perspective on E.H. Taylor. So any kind of insight, stories, or what's the lineage there?
Yeah, and so I should be clear that we did not overlap. He did not give me a bunch of good advice when I started. So the way I like to think about it is the first house on property here we call it the old Taylor House, and it was built for Commodore Richard Taylor to build locks on the Kentucky River. 100 years later, E.H. Taylor came, and then 100 years after that is when I started working. So every 100 years I say we send somebody to the distillery.
That's funny.
But my great-grandfather's great-grandfather is E.H. Taylor.
Wow.
So there was
and that really puts in perspective how long ago and how old this rick house is too.
Yes, and honestly, we are just now, I think, executing on his vision of what this place could be. He went bankrupt building it because, he would say quality bourbon deserves quality aging environment, or if your distillery looks like a castle, your bourbon ought to be fit for a king. He was way ahead of his time. Everything had to be utmost class. Everything had to be perfect.
Yeah.
State of the art, and he just was way ahead of it. So we went bankrupt doing it.
What were some of the other innovations?
Steam heating. So that's another awesome thing about this warehouse. So in Kentucky, we mentioned the temperature fluctuation. Well, if you get to say, January through March, you might be under 40 degrees for 3 months in a row. And in reality, when that's happening, there's not much going on inside the barrel. It's just kind of sitting dormant. So E.H. Taylor would steam heat his warehouses to make sure there was a full 12-month cycle of aging.
Gotcha.
So, building just the state-of-the-art warehouses. This one you can barely see here is a limestone base brick structure, just over the top nice, and it matches the rest of the distillery. So you can see his original distillery on the side of the bottles. Now, that's back at the backside, and this warehouse C looks just like that building, limestone brick.
And that's very different from when we covered Albert Blanton, which he came years and years and years later, and the warehouse he chose was metal.
Yeah. And if you think Blanton's is younger than Taylor, and it's because that metal warehouse go faster, gets hotter faster, colder faster. This brick limestone takes longer to have those transitions.
Gotcha. Well, that makes sense.
Do you guys want me to open this?
Yeah, let's pour some. I think I hear Lee behind me just saying, when are we going to taste this, Bo? When are we going to taste this? So if you guys want to pour out, let's do a little cheers.
There you go, Mr. Lee. All right. Yeah, this is a very lucky day to have the actual bottle and taste it.
I thought it was really neat to have. Oh boy,
we're going to be safe.
That makes me nervous.
Me too. We're just going to hold it.
Yeah, that's great.
Thanks, Robert.
Appreciate it.
So yeah, cheers to E.H. Taylor and the new Warehouse C release, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
10-year bottle and bond.
It's delicious.
Yeah,
100
I'm sure.
proof. You wouldn't. You don't think 100 proof when you taste them.
Yeah.
It's neat. You just really don't.
Amazing.
It's really, really smooth.
Great. Well, thank you both. We're at our time. Any closing words from either one of you?
Good luck. Enjoy the quest to find it.
Yeah.
And if you find it, drink it, enjoy it,
Yes.
share it.
Agreed.
And come see us.
Yeah, awesome. All right, guys, I want to get a peek of these barrels again. Thank you both. Here's one of my favorite things, is just come in here and seek old barrels and new barrels and see what they've laid down. It's one of my favorite spots.